On a winter night in a small mountain town buried under snow, a police officer found something that would change his life forever. It was not a person. It was not a crime. It was a dying German Shepherd puppy, half frozen in the storm. What happened next was a race against time, a test of the heart, and a story that proves even in the coldest moments of life, hope can still breathe. Stay with us to the end, because this is not just a rescue story. This is a story about faith, about second chances, and about the quiet miracles that happen when someone refuses to walk away. And before we begin, tell us where you are watching from today. Drop your city and country in the comments. Your story is part of this journey too. Winter arrived early in Silver Pine, Montana, the kind of winter that did not knock on doors but kicked them open. Snow fell in wide, heavy sheets, erasing the edges of the world, softening mountains, burying fences, swallowing roads. The town itself looked like a forgotten sketch under white charcoal, only the amber streetlights glowing like small, stubborn stars. Wind slid through the pine forests and across frozen lakes, howling as if the land itself were breathing. It was a night when the cold was not just a temperature but a presence, a thing with hands. Officer Nathan Cole was already on duty when the storm worsened. Nathan was 38 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, built like someone who had learned early that the world would not move out of his way. His hair was dark, cut short in regulation style, and his face carried the lines of a man who had not slept well in many years. A pale scar curved just above his right eyebrow, thin but permanent, left from a rescue operation 5 winters earlier when a stranded family's car slid into a ravine and Nathan had followed them down without waiting for backup. That night, a child lived, and Nathan nearly did not. Since then, something inside him had stayed half awake, half listening for disaster. Around town, he was known as steady, quiet, respectful. He spoke little, worked hard, and never asked for praise. The divorce 2 years earlier had carved him into a more careful man. He lived alone now in a small cabin near Glacier Lake, not because he disliked people, but because silence was easier than remembering. The radio crackled as snow thickened. Unit 4, report to mile marker 27. Possible road obstruction after avalanche, weather deteriorating fast. Nathan answered immediately. Copy. On my way. His patrol truck pushed forward, tires chewing through slush and ice. Headlights cut narrow tunnels through the storm. The mountains loomed like sleeping giants, their shapes blurred by falling snow. As he drove, Nathan checked the sky, the road, the dark edges of the forest. Every winter in Silver Pine came with its own quiet disasters: stranded drivers, lost hikers, frozen engines, broken people. At mile marker 27, he slowed. The road curved along a construction site abandoned since October, a skeleton of half-built concrete walls and twisted steel beams, all now buried under fresh snow. A fallen warning sign lay on its side. The wind screamed through the hollow framework, making the place sound alive. Nathan's headlights swept across something that was not snow. He braked. At first he thought it was debris. Then he realized debris did not breathe. Half buried at the edge of the site, against a low drift of wind-packed snow, lay a small shape, dark against the white. It did not move except for the faintest tremor of life. Nathan pulled his truck to the shoulder, switched on emergency lights, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him like a wall. He crossed the few steps to the shape, boots sinking, snow filling the tops. He knelt. It was a German Shepherd puppy, no more than 3 months old. Her coat, black and tan, was soaked and stiff with ice. Snow clung to her fur in frozen clumps. One ear lay folded awkwardly under her head, the other barely visible. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven pulses. Her body was thin, ribs faint beneath wet fur. A torn blue collar hung loose around her neck, no tag attached. Her eyes were half open, not glazed, not gone, looking at him. Nathan removed his gloves and touched her side. The cold of her body startled him more than the wind. She did not whimper, did not try to move. She only held his gaze, and in that moment the storm seemed to quiet, the world shrinking to the space between his breath and hers. He knew hypothermia when he saw it. He knew dehydration. He knew the weight of something almost lost. Without hesitation, Nathan unbuttoned his heavy police coat and wrapped it around the puppy's body, tucking it under her chest, around her back, over her neck. The fabric swallowed her small frame. He slid his arms beneath her carefully and lifted. She was frighteningly light. Her body shuddered once, a weak tremor, and then she relaxed into him, her nose pressed against his uniform. A faint sound escaped her throat, barely more than a breath. "I've got you," Nathan said, though the wind nearly stole the words. "I'm here." He turned back toward the truck, shielding her from the storm with his body. Snow gathered on his shoulders, his hair, his eyelashes. By the time he reached the passenger door, his jacket was already crusted with ice. Inside the cab, the heater blasted warm air. He laid her across the seat, head angled toward him, her body wrapped in his coat like a cocoon. He placed one bare hand against her chest, feeling the fragile rhythm of her heart. "You're staying," he said softly. "Understand me? You're staying." The radio hissed. "Unit 4, confirm status." Nathan looked once more at the puppy's face. Her eyes fluttered but did not close. "Dispatch," he said, voice steady. "I've found a juvenile canine in critical condition, hypothermia. I'm requesting permission to break patrol and transport to Evergreen Veterinary Clinic immediately." A pause, wind and static. "Permission granted. Drive safe." He started the engine. As the truck rolled forward, snow hammered the windshield. Nathan drove as if the storm were a living thing trying to keep him from wherever hope waited. His left hand stayed on the wheel. His right never left the puppy's side. Each time her breathing faltered, he pressed his palm gently against her ribs, counting. 1, 2, 3, stay, stay. The road narrowed. Visibility vanished. His headlights carved tunnels that collapsed as soon as he passed. He spoke to her the whole way, low and constant, telling her things he had not said to anyone in years. About the lake behind his house that froze into silver glass. About the smell of pine in spring. About how winter always ended even when it did not seem possible. "Your name is Lila," he told her, "because even the darkest night has a light somewhere." She did not respond. But when he said her name again, her ear twitched. Evergreen Veterinary Clinic appeared at last through the snow, its windows glowing warm against the black. Nathan pulled in crooked, left the engine running, and lifted Lila into his arms. Inside, the heat wrapped around them. At the front desk stood Margaret Hale, a woman in her early 50s, short, sturdy, with silver hair pulled into a low bun and eyes sharpened by years of emergency work. She took one look at Nathan's face and the bundle in his arms and stood up fast. "Back room," she said. "Now." They moved together, professional and quick. In the exam room waited Dr. Samuel Wright, a tall, lean man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed white beard and the calm expression of someone who had stood between life and death too many times to count. His hands were already gloved. "German Shepherd," he said, bending low. "Very young. 3 months, maybe less," Nathan answered. Samuel examined her gums, her eyes, her limbs. "Severe hypothermia, dehydration, she's barely hanging on." He looked up at Nathan. "But she's still here." Those words landed in Nathan's chest like a door opening. "Let's get her warm," Samuel said. "Fluids, heat pad, now." Nurses moved, equipment hummed, a heated blanket unfolded. Clear fluid began to drip through a thin line into Lila's front leg. Nathan stepped back only when they asked him to. His hands still tingled from the memory of her heartbeat. He stood at the foot of the table, watching every movement, every breath, every rise and fall of her chest as the storm raged outside and the long night pressed against the windows. And for the first time since winter began, he believed the storm might lose. Snow did not fall anymore. It attacked. From the moment Nathan Cole left the Evergreen Veterinary Clinic parking lot, the storm seemed to sense him, as if the mountain itself had chosen that instant to release its full fury. The windshield blurred white within seconds. Wind shoved the patrol truck sideways. Ice rattled against the metal frame like thrown gravel. Inside the cab, the heater roared. On the passenger seat, wrapped tightly in Nathan's heavy winter coat, lay Lila. She was barely conscious. Her body trembled in small, exhausted waves. The moisture frozen into her fur slowly melted, soaking the fabric beneath her. Nathan adjusted the coat, tucking it closer around her chest, shielding her head from the vent's direct heat. He had learned long ago that sudden temperature changes could do more harm than good. His training did not come from textbooks alone. It came from bodies he had carried out of rivers, from children pulled from wreckage, from people whose survival had depended on decisions made in seconds. Nathan's right hand rested on Lila's ribs. Every few moments he counted. 1, 2, 3. Sometimes the pause between breaths stretched too long. Each time, his heart followed. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Just stay." Lila's eyes fluttered, not fully open, not closed either, somewhere between. The color beneath the haze was a soft amber brown, like autumn leaves buried under frost. When the truck lurched around a bend, her ear twitched again, the same ear as before, and Nathan felt something tighten in his chest. She could still hear him. The radio crackled. Dispatch checked his location, warned of fallen branches near the eastern ridge, advised reduced speed. Nathan acknowledged without taking his eyes from the road. His focus had narrowed to a thin line of survival stretching from the white road ahead to the fragile body beside him. The mountains of western Montana rose like frozen waves. Snow swallowed every familiar landmark. Trees bent low beneath the weight of the storm, their branches clawing at the darkness. The world felt emptied of people, as if the storm had decided this story would be told with only two voices, Nathan and Lila. Nathan's mind drifted, as it always did when life pressed this close, to his cabin by Glacier Lake. The small wood stove, the scent of pine sap that lingered even in winter. He imagined Lila there, curled near the fire, warm, safe. He did not know why the image came so clearly, only that it did. Another mile, another curve, the road dropped steeply. He eased the truck down, engine braking, careful not to let the tires slide. His fingers tightened on the wheel. A sudden gust slammed into the truck's side, pushing him toward the shoulder. Nathan corrected smoothly, heart hammering. Lila made a sound, not a bark, not a whine, a thin, broken breath of a sound, like the world's smallest plea. Nathan reached across and placed his palm flat against her chest, feeling the weak flutter of her heart through the layers of fabric and fur. His voice came out rougher than he expected. "I know," he said. "I know. I'm here." He told her about the lake again, about how in the spring the ice cracked like thunder and the water reflected the sky so perfectly it was hard to tell where the world ended. He told her about the deer that crossed his yard every morning, the old radio he kept on the kitchen counter, the photograph of his parents that still stood on the shelf even though the frame was chipped and the edges yellowed. He told her about his job, about how people thought being a police officer meant guns and sirens and power, but mostly it meant holding things together when they were breaking. He told her about the scar above his eyebrow. 5 winters ago, a family, a little boy trapped in the back seat, glass, blood, snow, the way the boy had clung to him afterward, refusing to let go, the way Nathan had stood alone in the snow later, shaking, not from the cold but from knowing how close the night had come to taking someone. "I didn't let go then," he said. "I'm not letting go now." Lila's breathing stuttered, then steadied. The road finally began to descend from the ridge. The wind eased just enough for the world to reappear in fragments, the faint glow of distant town lights, the dark shape of Evergreen's low buildings ahead, the outline of the clinic's sign flickering through the snow. Nathan's chest loosened a fraction. He pulled into the clinic lot at an angle, tires sliding slightly before gripping. He did not bother shutting off the engine. He lifted Lila carefully, her body limp in his arms, her head resting against his shoulder. For a brief second she opened her eyes wider, just enough to meet his. There was no fear in them, only a tired, searching question. "Not tonight," Nathan whispered. "You're not leaving tonight." Inside the clinic, the warmth rushed over them. The scent of disinfectant. The low hum of machines. The steady rhythm of a place where endings were sometimes postponed. Margaret Hale was already moving from behind the desk, her boots clicking on tile. Her eyes took in Nathan's snow-covered uniform, the soaked coat in his arms, the small, unmoving shape inside it. "Exam room 3, she said. No wasted words. They passed through swinging doors into the bright white of the treatment area. Dr. Samuel Wright looked up from his notes. The lines on his face deepened as he saw Lila. "How long has she been out there?" he asked. "I don't know," Nathan replied. "Long enough." Samuel's hands were gentle, precise. He checked Lila's gums, her eyes, her limbs. He listened to her heart, his jaw tightened. "Severe hypothermia, dehydration. She's been without food and water for days." He met Nathan's eyes. "She's critical, but alive." Samuel nodded once. "Yes, and that matters." The team moved quickly. Heated blanket, IV line, monitors. The clinic transformed into controlled motion. Lila's small body was placed on the table, her fur slowly steaming as warmth returned. Clear fluid began to drip into her vein. Nathan stood at the foot of the table, his hands clenched at his sides, the memory of her heartbeat still pulsing in his palms. Minutes stretched. The storm pounded the roof. The wind rattled the windows. Then Lila's chest lifted, and lifted again. Samuel glanced at the monitor. Heart rate's improving. Nathan released a breath he had not realized he was holding. They worked through the night. The clock on the wall crept toward morning. At one point, a nurse wiped the remaining ice from Lila's fur with a warm cloth, revealing the pale tan streak along her neck, soft and clean beneath the grime. She looked impossibly small on the metal table, a scrap of life held together by wires and hope. Near dawn, Samuel stepped back, pulling off his gloves. His voice softened. She's stable for now. The next few hours will tell us more. Nathan nodded. His knees felt weak. He leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the cold tile, his back pressed to the cabinet. He did not care how it looked. He did not care who saw. Lila's breathing was still uneven, but it was breathing. He watched the slow rise and fall of her chest as the sky beyond the clinic windows began to lighten, the storm finally loosening its grip on the world. Winter had not won tonight. Morning arrived without color. The storm had loosened its grip on Silver Pine, but winter still ruled the land, pressing a pale gray sky down onto the mountains and the frozen streets below. The Evergreen Veterinary Clinic looked small and stubborn against the snowdrifts, its windows glowing faintly like lanterns in the cold. Nathan Cole had not gone home. He sat in the narrow chair beside Lila's treatment table, his coat draped over the back, his hands folded loosely in his lap. His eyes had barely closed. Every sound in the clinic felt magnified. The quiet hum of machines, the soft shuffle of boots, the distant clink of metal trays. Somewhere behind the walls, another dog barked once, then fell silent. Lila lay wrapped in a heated blanket, IV line taped delicately to her front leg. Her fur was no longer frozen, but it was still damp, darker where the snow had soaked through. The pale tan streak along her neck caught the overhead light each time she shifted, and for a moment, Nathan found himself thinking of summer, of warm earth and open skies, things that seemed very far away now. Dr. Samuel Wright returned just after sunrise. Samuel looked, as he always did in the mornings, calm, tired, composed by decades of standing at the fragile line between loss and hope. His white beard was neatly trimmed, his lab coat already smudged at the sleeves, his eyes sharp but kind. He studied the monitors, checked Lila's gums, listened to her heart. He nodded once, slowly. "She's holding," he said. "That's more than I expected last night." Nathan's shoulders sagged slightly. "What happens now?" "Now we watch. Carefully." Samuel straightened. The hypothermia caused shock. Her organs took a hit. The dehydration was severe. She'll need days of fluids, warmth, and constant monitoring. She's not out of danger. Nathan nodded. He had expected nothing less. By mid-morning, the sun finally broke through the clouds, turning the snow outside into a field of cold diamonds. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and warm air, of medicine and quiet effort. Nurses came and went. One of them, a young woman named Elena Ruiz, small, dark-haired, quick-moving, with the nervous energy of someone still new to emergency work, brought Nathan coffee without asking. "You look like you could use this," she said. "Thank you," he replied. His voice felt unused. Lila stirred once, her eyes opening a fraction. Nathan leaned forward, his hand hovering near her side, careful not to disturb the IV line. Her gaze found him. This time it stayed. It wasn't the vacant look of exhaustion anymore. It was aware. He swallowed. "You're doing good," he murmured. "Just keep doing that." Her ear twitched, the same one as always, and then her eyes closed again. The day passed slowly. Snowmelt dripped from the clinic's roof in steady rhythm. The storm clouds retreated, leaving behind a brittle blue sky. Nathan spoke with Samuel again in the early afternoon. "If she stabilizes," Samuel said, "we'll keep her here a few more days. Then she'll need somewhere warm and calm to continue recovery, a shelter environment but one that understands critical care." "Pine Hollow," Nathan said immediately. Samuel smiled faintly. I was going to suggest that. They'll follow protocol, check for a microchip, post notices, wait the required period before any adoption can even be discussed. Nathan nodded. That was as it should be. That evening, Lila's temperature held steady. She accepted a few drops of water from a syringe. When the nurse adjusted her blanket, Lila shifted, leaning the smallest amount toward Nathan's hand. That movement felt louder than anything else in the room. On the third day, Lila's breathing strengthened. Her eyes opened more often. Her tail moved once. Not a wag, not yet, but a conscious motion, slow and uncertain. Samuel allowed himself a thin smile. "She's stubborn," he said. "That helps." The following days blurred into a rhythm of beeping monitors, warm blankets, and quiet conversations. Nathan returned home only to shower and change, then came straight back. He brought Lila a small cloth toy one evening, shaped like a fox, bright orange against the sterile white of the clinic. He placed it near her paw. She did not move at first. An hour later, her paw rested against it. On the fifth night, Lila tried to lift her head and failed. Her body trembled with effort. Nathan rose from his chair and gently placed his hand beneath her chin, supporting the weight. Her muscles were still weak, her frame too thin, but the will inside her had sharpened. "Easy," he said. "You don't have to rush." She looked at him, eyes clearer now, and released a small breath that almost sounded like a sigh. By the end of the week, Samuel removed the IV. Lila could drink on her own, small, careful sips. She had not eaten yet, but her interest in the world had returned. She followed movement with her eyes. She reacted to voices. She no longer felt like a life waiting to leave. "She's ready for the next step," Samuel said. Pine Hollow Shelter arrived the next morning. 2 volunteers came in a white van dusted with snow. Karen Whitfield, the shelter director, was a tall woman in her 40s with silver-streaked blonde hair and a steady, compassionate expression. Years of rescue work had taught her how to hold both hope and loss without breaking. With her was Mark Benson, shorter, broad, quiet, with the weathered hands of a man who had built and repaired more than he could count. They listened carefully as Samuel explained Lila's condition, her ongoing needs, her fragile progress. Karen nodded. "She'll have a quiet kennel, heated floor, constant monitoring. We'll continue fluids and nutrition support, and of course the legal hold." Nathan watched as they transferred Lila into a padded carrier lined with blankets. She was awake now, eyes open, tracking him as they moved her. When he stepped closer, she shifted slightly inside the carrier, pressing her nose against the mesh. He placed 2 fingers there. "See you soon," he said. She did not whine. She did not struggle. She simply watched him, steady and silent, as the van doors closed. Outside, the air was sharp but calm. The storm had finally ended. Snow lay untouched across the town, smooth and bright beneath the winter sun. Nathan stood in the parking lot until the van disappeared down the road. The longest part of the storm, he realized, was not the night of wind and ice. It was the waiting. Winter settled into Silver Pine like a patient animal, no longer roaring but watching everything with pale, unblinking eyes. Snow still lay thick along the streets and rooftops, but the sky had softened into a quiet blue, and the wind, at last, had grown tired. At Pine Hollow Shelter, Lila began the slow work of learning the world again. The shelter stood at the edge of town, a low wooden building backed by pine forest, smoke curling from its chimney in thin gray ribbons. Inside, the air was warm, the floors heated beneath the kennels, the lights gentle. The place smelled of soap, dog food, and something steadier: patience. Karen Whitfield, the director, ran the shelter the way some people ran families. She was in her mid-40s, tall, with silver-threaded blonde hair always pulled into a loose braid down her back. Her eyes were sharp but kind, and she carried herself with the calm authority of someone who had learned that panic solved nothing. Years of rescue work had carved lines of both grief and humor around her mouth. She believed in second chances the way other people believed in gravity. Mark Benson, her lead caretaker, was quieter, broad, slow-moving, with a beard flecked by gray and hands scarred from decades of building kennels, mending fences, lifting broken bodies into better futures. He spoke little, but when he did, the animals listened. Lila's kennel sat in the warmest corner of the building, lined with thick blankets and a low heat pad. Her chart hung neatly on the door. Female German Shepherd, approximately 3 months. Hypothermia, severe dehydration, critical recovery, legal hold, 14 days. The first night, Lila barely moved. She lay curled into herself, eyes half open, chest rising and falling with effort. She did not bark, did not whine, did not explore. When Mark slid a bowl of water toward her, she sniffed once and turned her head away. The second morning, Nathan arrived before dawn. He had finished a long shift, the patrol truck still dusted with snow. He parked at the shelter, walked inside, and went straight to Lila's kennel. He crouched beside the gate, his gloved fingers resting on the cool metal. "Morning," he said softly. Lila's eyes lifted. That was all, but it was enough. He stayed with her while Karen explained the schedule. Fluids every 4 hours, nutritional paste, quiet environment, no forced interaction, no pressure. Legal notices had already been posted. The waiting period had begun. Nathan listened. Then he nodded. Then he stayed. That became the pattern. Every morning before his shift, every evening after. He sat beside Lila's kennel and talked. Sometimes about his day, sometimes about the weather, sometimes about nothing at all. He never tried to touch her unless she leaned toward him first. He never rushed. On the 5th day, Lila drank a full bowl of water. On the 7th, she accepted soft food from a spoon. On the 10th, she took 3 unsteady steps. Each small victory felt enormous. The other animals noticed. Dogs barked when Nathan arrived, tails thumping, noses pressed through the wire. A one-eyed husky named Jasper howled every time the door opened. A thin brown mutt called Penny, missing part of her ear, followed Nathan from kennel to kennel when he helped Mark clean. But Lila remained quiet, watchful, her world still carefully measured. 2 weeks passed. By the time the legal hold ended, Lila could stand without trembling. Her coat had begun to shine again, the tan streak at her neck glowing softly in the shelter lights. She still startled at sudden noises, still flinched when doors slammed, but her eyes followed Nathan with something new. Recognition. One evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, Nathan knelt beside her kennel. He had been talking about the lake near his house, about how the ice would break in spring, about the geese that returned every year. Lila shifted. Slowly, carefully, she moved her head forward until her nose brushed the tips of his fingers. Nathan froze. He did not move his hand, did not breathe. Lila sniffed him once, then again. Then she rested her chin lightly on his knuckles and closed her eyes. Trust, he realized, was not loud. It was a whisper. From that night on, she waited for him. Every morning she would lift her head when the door opened. Every evening she would move closer to the front of her kennel when she heard his footsteps. Mark noticed. "She's chosen you," he said one night, his voice low. Nathan did not answer. He was not ready for the weight of that sentence. Winter had begun to loosen its hold on Silver Pine. The snow still lay thick in the shadows, but the sun now climbed higher in the sky, and the ice along the eaves melted into slow, steady drops. The town breathed again. People lingered on sidewalks. The diner's windows steamed with warmth and voices. It was the kind of quiet change that only those who had survived the storm truly noticed. At Pine Hollow Shelter, the world shifted too. Lila was no longer the motionless, broken little body that had arrived weeks earlier. She stood now, thin but steady, ears lifting when she heard footsteps, eyes brightening when she recognized familiar faces. Her tail did not wag wildly, not yet, but it moved in small, careful arcs that spoke of something rebuilding from the inside. Nathan arrived early that afternoon. He had finished patrol, the radio finally silent for once, the long winter calls fading into memory. He walked through the shelter doors, nodding to Karen at the desk. She smiled at him, the way people do when they already know what is coming but let the world take its time. "She's in the yard," Karen said. The outdoor play yard sat behind the shelter, shielded from the wind by tall pine fencing. Patches of snow still clung to the edges, but the center had thawed into dark, damp earth. The sun filtered through bare branches, scattering pale gold across the ground. Lila stood near the fence when Nathan stepped outside. She turned her head at the sound of the door, her ears rising, her body straightening. For a moment she only watched him. Then she took a step, then another. By the time he knelt, she was close enough that her fur brushed his knee. "Hey," he said softly. She lowered her head and pressed the side of her face against his leg. That small, deliberate act carried more weight than any sound she could have made. They stayed like that for a long time. Later that afternoon, a family arrived. They came in a gray sedan that pulled into the gravel lot, tires crunching softly. Daniel and Rebecca Foster stepped out together, both in their mid-30s, bundled against the lingering cold. Daniel was tall and broad-shouldered, with careful eyes and the look of a man who worked with his hands. Rebecca was smaller, her dark hair tied back, her smile warm and steady. Between them skipped Molly, their 7-year-old daughter, cheeks red from the cold, holding a bright pink leash looped around her mittened hand. They had filed the paperwork. Their references had checked out. Their home, according to Karen's visit, was solid, safe, filled with light. Everything about them was right. Karen led them into the yard. "This is Lila," she said gently. Molly knelt immediately, extending her mittened hand. "Hi, puppy." Lila sniffed once, politely, carefully. Then she lifted her head and looked past them. Her eyes found Nathan standing a few steps away. For a second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lila turned. She walked straight to him. She pressed her side against his leg, the full length of her body leaning into him, and stayed there. Nathan's hand fell to her back without thought. Daniel and Rebecca exchanged a glance, the kind that said they already understood what the dog had decided. Molly's smile faded, not in anger, but in quiet acceptance. "She likes him," she said. Karen watched in silence, her expression unreadable, but her eyes soft. They tried anyway. They tossed a small ball across the yard. They called her name. They knelt and offered treats. Lila's ears flicked. Her eyes followed the ball, but her body never left Nathan's side. When he moved, she moved. When he knelt, she knelt. When he stopped, she pressed closer. After a while, Rebecca stood. I think she's already home." Daniel nodded slowly. He knelt once more and gently scratched Lila behind the ear. She allowed it, then turned back to Nathan, settling against him again. They thanked Karen. They thanked Nathan. They thanked Lila. And they left. The yard fell quiet again. Nathan remained kneeling in the dirt, Lila's weight steady against his leg. Karen approached slowly. "You know what this means," she said. Nathan did not answer at first. He looked at Lila, at the thin scar along her paw from the IV line, at the faint tan streak in her coat catching the sun. "I can't let her go," he said finally. His voice was calm, certain. "She's not just a dog, she's mine." Karen smiled, the kind of smile that came from many years of watching broken lives rebuild. "Then we'll start the paperwork." The forms took time. Background check, final home visit, signatures. Nathan's name filled the lines with steady strokes. Each one felt like a promise written in ink. When the last paper was filed, Karen handed him Lila's folder. "She's yours." Nathan knelt and slipped the new collar around Lila's neck, a simple leather band with a small silver tag. Lila leaned forward and pressed her head into his chest. He closed his eyes. The choice had been made. Spring did not arrive all at once in Silverpine. It came quietly, in pieces. The slow drip of melting snow from the roof lines, the dark earth showing through the edges of the road, the first brave birds returning to the trees. Winter loosened its grip without ceremony, leaving behind a town that felt older, softer, and strangely grateful to still be standing. Nathan Cole drove out of the shelter parking lot with Lila beside him. She sat upright in the passenger seat, the new leather collar snug around her neck, the silver tag resting against her chest. The window was cracked open just enough to let the fresh mountain air into the cab. Lila lifted her nose, testing the world, ears turning with every passing sound. This drive was nothing like the first. No sirens, no storm, no fear. Only the quiet hum of the road and the steady rhythm of two hearts finally moving in the same direction. They turned onto the narrow road that curved along Glacier Lake. The water was still half frozen, a mirror of broken silver reflecting the sky. Nathan's cabin stood alone at the edge of the trees, small, weathered, and warm. Lila jumped down the moment he opened the door. She did not hesitate. She circled the yard, sniffed the old pine stump, trotted to the porch, then returned to him, tail sweeping the air in wide, joyful arcs. Her body had grown stronger, her steps sure. The thin, trembling puppy from the snowbank no longer existed. Inside, Nathan had prepared. A soft bed waited in the corner by the window. 2 bowls shone in the kitchen. A basket of toys sat beside the hearth. The wood stove crackled, filling the room with heat and the scent of burning pine. Lila explored everything with careful curiosity. She paused at the doorway to the bedroom, then padded inside, sniffed the floor, the wall, the edge of the bed. After a moment, she returned to him, pressed her head gently against his leg, then wandered back to her new bed and curled into it, as if she had always known it was hers. That night, she did not stay there long. By the time Nathan turned off the lights, Lila had moved to the floor beside his bed, her body stretched out, her breathing deep and steady. He lowered his hand and rested it on her back, feeling the warmth beneath his palm. For the first time since the storm, he slept without dreaming. Days passed. Morning walks along the frozen edge of the lake became their ritual. Lila's ears perked at every sound, her tail high, her eyes bright. People in town stopped to admire her. "Beautiful German shepherd," they said. Nathan would nod, watching the sun catch the tan streak along her neck, remembering the day he had pulled that same body from the snow. At night, Lila waited by the door until he returned from patrol. When he set down his keys, she would press against him, solid and real and warm. The cabin filled with the quiet presence of another life, and the silence Nathan had lived with for so long finally learned a new shape. One evening, as the ice on the lake began to break, Nathan sat on the porch steps while Lila lay at his feet. The sky burned orange and pink. A goose flew low over the water. The world felt full again. He looked down at her. "You saved me," he said quietly. Lila lifted her head and licked his hand once. It was answer enough. This story reminds us that miracles are not always loud. Sometimes they arrive quietly on a winter road. Sometimes they look like a man who refuses to walk away. Sometimes they breathe through a fragile life that should not have survived. God does not always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends a tired police officer. Sometimes he sends you. In our everyday lives, we pass many moments like that. Puppy in the snow, a neighbor who needs kindness, a stranger who needs help, a heart that only needs someone to stop and care. When we choose love over fear, we become part of God's miracle for someone else. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Leave a comment below about where you are watching from, and subscribe to this channel so more stories of hope can reach more souls. May God bless you and your family. May he protect your home, and may he use your hands to bring light into this world. If you believe in this message, type amen in the comments.